warmly welcome you all to the Dialogues on Development Management 2023. DODM has been made possible as a part of collaboration, co-creation between 13 partner organizations, a galaxy of speakers and thinkers from the sector, and many more. The event has been created carefully as a space for stakeholders from diverse backgrounds to come together to discuss, ensue dialogue, and ideate on development management and management for social change. We are so excited and humbled to be a part of this first of its kind event, and we hope you all enjoy all the sessions you attend. The event features parallel tracks running in different rooms here at the venue. The three main tracks are of the domains talent, finance and philanthropy, and data sciences. We now begin with the first event of the day, the opening plenary on the power of management to bring about social change. The session has representatives from Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar to discuss and explore the dimensions of management to bring about social change and drive sustained impact at scale. I welcome all our three speakers sitting here at the stage, Dr. Saurabh Garg, Ms. Neera Nandi, and Mr. Sridharan, Mr. Ravi Sridharan. Dr. Saurabh Garg is an IAS officer of the Odisha cadre. He has worked on areas like digitizing agriculture, direct income transfer scheme for farmers, formation of the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, and improving the foreign direct investment policies. He is presently the Secretary of the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. Neera Nandi is the co-founder and partner at Dasra India, a strategic philanthropic organization that started in 1999. Her overarching goal is to enable social entrepreneurs and funders with the support they need to achieve big goals in areas such as gender, urban resilience, and sanitation through system change and collaborative philanthropy. Ravi Sridharan is the co-founder and president of ISDM. Ravi switched from the corporate to the social sector in 2011, joining Azim Premji Foundation, where he was the head of education, leadership, and management. Ravi, together with Sharad Agarwal, Suparna Divakar, and Gaurav Shah, founded ISDM in 2016. I welcome Ravi to share his views and take the session forward.
Good morning, everybody. Everybody has come up to me this morning and said, it's amazing that you could fill up a hall at 9:15 a.m. And it's truly overwhelming to stand here and welcome you. I've been asked to welcome you and then share my thoughts. So this is the welcome part. 7 years ago when we started ISDM, to tell you the truth, we started with something called Dialogues on Development Management. We used to get together 10, 15, on the highest side, 20 people together in a room and have a dialogue on what is this development management? How should we think about it? What should we be thinking about? Who should we involve and so on and so forth? And we used to struggle to get 20 people into a room. To think that today we have some 2,000 registrations, a likely attendance of about 1,000 people is absolutely, absolutely overwhelming for someone like me. And the more fascinating thing is that we're not discussing, and I'm not saying this, maybe as I say it, it's going to come out badly, but we're not even discussing the social issues, whether it's water, livelihoods, gender, et cetera. We're discussing management. Unthinkable that we could fill a hall of people who are interested to listen, talk, share, understand views and thoughts about management in the social sector. And really, it's, I want to thank all of you. I want to thank, first of all the partners who came together, and you would have seen their names mentioned all over. And it's really that combination that was able to share this message out to so many people and get so many of you here. Grateful to all the people who are participating as speakers. And I know we have something like 60 odd speakers, and each one of them, is a treat to listen to engage with. And we've got so many leaders from across Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar today in this gathering through the day. And I hope all of you get the opportunity to meet others, exchange your, at least your name cards and stay in touch and continue these dialogues. It's through this dialogue really that, we hope development management will evolve and become a thing. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day. Now I'm going to switch to the sharing my thoughts before Saurabh and Neera take the stage. Let me start by sharing a quote by Jeff Berdak. In fact, when Gaurav Shah and I met him in San Francisco, he's the founder and CEO of Bridgespan globally. And he said this line, which has stuck with us. He said that the businesses are overmanaged and underled. And the social sector is overled and undermanaged. And that was such a powerful statement for us. So I think the business has a different problem to solve, and that's about, maybe it's about leadership or whatever it is. But there is a problem for us in the sector also to solve, which is about management. And management somewhere, in fact, when we started 7 years ago, people would say, why are you calling it management? Call it something else. Call it leadership or stewardship. Management are these bad guys. Keep those guys away from you. Don't call it management. Management is what caused all the problems. Now don't tell me management is going to solve the problem, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we insisted, because management is not some property of business. Management is a verb. Management for us, and certainly for us at ISDM, is a scaffolding on which you can do big things. You cannot run global organizations, or you cannot run a whole ministry across the country without management. So there is management for the business, there is management for the state, which we call typically Masters in Business Administration and Masters in Public Administration. We need something like that for the social sector. Actually, not even like that. We need something for the social sector. And by that, I don't mean what is taught in the MBA schools. This management has to be imagined very, very differently. And if we are not doing that, we will actually do more damage to the sector than any good. And that's something I want to make it crystal clear up front, that this is not a conference to figure out how we start hiring. And there's nothing wrong with hiring MBAs, but that's not the management I'm talking about when I stand here. Management for the social sector has to be thought of very, very differently. And let me just give you, an idea of why I say that. The first thing is that management in the social sector has to be rooted in an understanding of the complex nature of society. Management for the social sector has to be rooted in understanding the complex nature of social change. Social change doesn't happen easily, doesn't happen for decades. It takes a lot of things to come together for that to happen. And these are not things, by the way, I was taught at IIM Ahmedabad. It's a very different way you're looking at it. And then when I come to specific management topics itself, think about, let's say, talent. Managing talent is one of the most important things you do in any space, whether it is the state, the markets, or civil society. The drivers of talent in business is very, very different from the drivers of talent in the social sector, or for that matter, drivers of talent in the government. And we have to think of it differently. In fact, a big study that we did, which went across 2 years, clearly demonstrated that the drivers for talent, people who join the sector, people who are motivated, people who stay, are very, very different. There are things like purpose, there are things like culture, there are things like leadership, there are things like learning value, there are things like integrity. It's not that it's not there in business. It's just that they're different in the weightages. Money is equally important for the social sector, but it may not be as important. So it's very important to understand these differences. If you take finance, the social sector today, almost 98% of its finance is through grants. There's no concept of a grant in business. So how you manage grants is a very different way from how do you manage equity or debt. And more importantly, the sector now needs to start thinking that if it has to bridge the 7x gap, there is a 7x gap in private philanthropy this country needs to achieve its SDGs. So we spend about 1 lakh crores of private philanthropy in the country. The country needs about 7 lakh crores. And that's not going to come by just telling philanthropists to give more. We have to think of new structures, new management ways of attracting different types of capital. I mean, just to give you an idea, the money that the 7x gap you're talking about is 3% of the market cap in this country. So you have to figure out how do you unlock that money for the sector, and there are different ways of doing it. If you think about marketing, from the first day I left Ahmedabad and I was working, marketing was always about competition. Marketing was about market share, share of wallet, share of customer, share of eyeballs, whatever it was. This is not a competitive space. This is a collaborative space. Unless we are able to collaborate, and unfortunately, some of that management has seeped into our sector. We start behaving like we are in some business and we are competing. No, I want to make the child better rather than you. It doesn't work that way. We have to be collaborative. We have to figure out how do we work together. So we have to really reimagine management in the social sector, and if we don't, we will not achieve anything. And when I make this difference between management across the state, markets, and civil society, I also want to make the point that we should learn from each other. It's not that ignore them. No, we must cut that trust deficit that exists across Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, and that management needs to recognize that trust deficit exists and see how you're going to get over that. Because each of these three pillars of society have a role to play. No country or society is going to progress unless all those three pillars play an important role that they should. How will DM evolve? I think this is still early stages. There's lots of bits and pieces of work that's happening, but to see that 900 people are going to be here together to talk about management in the social sector, I hope they'll carry it away and talk to 9,000 people and 90,000 people who will change the way the sector looks at management and works so that it can achieve what it is set out to achieve, which is sustained impact at scale. You like it or not, you cannot get away from scale because you still are leaving millions of people behind. In spite of all the progress we've made, we're leaving millions behind. So you have to figure out scale. And it doesn't mean that every organization needs to operate at national scale. There is a collective process, there's a collaborative process of figuring those things out. So we have to work through dialogues. That's why we called it dialogues and development management. That's how we'll build development management. Through a lot of dialogues, and I hope these dialogues will continue in your respective organizations and different institutions, in the state, and so on and so forth. Our own belief is that the way to build knowledge for development management, which is really the raison d'etre for us to exist, is bringing practitioners and academics together. That's how we believe knowledge is going to get created for management for the social sector. So most of the work you'll do, you will find us putting social sector in the center and then bringing together academics and theoreticians and researchers to come together and engage in those conversations, because that's where knowledge gets created. If you just have academics sitting in a university trying to create knowledge, it's not going to happen. If you just have practitioners sitting together and trying to figure out knowledge, it's not going to happen. It's in that intersection that knowledge for development management is going to get created. What is the potential impact of DM? And we call it DM, development management. I honestly think that if you are able to scale and sustainably scale the impact of organizations in this country, the 1 lakh crores that is spent year on year and millions of people who are working, the impact of that will be multiplied. And even a 1% improvement in the impact of private philanthropy is worth 1,000 crores. And I'm hoping this will be a multiplier effect rather than a percentage increase. So it's a huge, huge impact. And forget the dollars. If you think of people, in COVID now, these numbers may not necessarily be validated, but during COVID, something like 200 million people slipped back into poverty. You have to figure out how you bring those 200 million back and many, many more. And we have to think of these things. And I've been asked to close, so I'm just going to give a sort of a vision for India at 100, because we are all now beginning to talk about India at 100, and 2047 is not very far away. I really hope India will have more than 100 organizations with more than 100 crore budget, impacting more than 100 crore people in the country. There is not a single organization that does that by now. Thank you very much. I'm supposed to invite. So I'm going to call Saurabh Garg to come and share his thoughts. Saurabh, we're really, really delighted that you could make it for this event with Parliament in session and so on and so forth. So really, really grateful that you're here. Saurabh, over to you.
Good morning and welcome to everyone. As I was telling Ravi, great to see this hall filled up at 9 o'clock on a morning. First of all, thanks to uh, Ravi and the entire ISDM team for organizing this Dialogues on Development Management and giving me the honor and privilege to come here. It's it's really great to be in this august presence, and I'm sure we need these dialogues between Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, as has been very aptly put, perhaps much more often. And I think we've crossed that stage of saying that we can all work in silos and do our own thing and still expect magic to happen. I think the objectives, the goals that all of us are working towards is Viksit Bharat by 2047, 100 years. Vision 2047 is what we are calling it within the government. And we all hope that it's an inclusive, equitable, and an empowered society that we see further being strengthened over the next 25 years that we are talking about. A partnership, I suppose, is the is the basis for the collaboration and the community engagement which is being sought for this development in this whole of government approach, whole of society approach, so that every part of the Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar play their respective parts. Obviously, what the role would be would vary depending on the sector, would vary depending on what we are talking about. And I suppose that's where management comes in to find that balance, because that balance or that share or what the role would vary from sector to sector. It would be very different in, let's say, defense and security, and it would be very different from any social management that we are talking about, social development. I'll take this opportunity to just talk a bit on how, in different ways, government is working with society, with markets, with the objective of having the goal of a place where there's opportunities to thrive for even the most marginalized. And in fact, that's the mandate of my ministry that I work in social justice and empowerment. We work with the most marginalized sections, most vulnerable sections of society. And it's always an issue on how to ensure that the design of the programs, the implementation, the monitoring, the transparency, the accountability, each of these factors works towards that common objective. And I think there are a lot of these areas where all of us need to work together. Just talking of design, I remember for example, people engaged in begging is one of the target groups of my ministry. And over the past couple of years, we've done a pilot in 7 cities with many organizations. Perhaps some of you might be present here today also, to help design what is the best way of handling this issue, because it's a much larger issue. It's not just a person from, there's also from the giver's perspective that you feel the need to give alms to people. And there is in every society, in every walk of life, there is, and of course there are people on the other side who are homeless, shelterless, etc. And how we design that program is something which cannot be done in isolation by either the government or the civil society or other organizations. And I think that's how we need to work. I remember a few years back, I was working on the Kalia program, which was the precursor to the PM Kisan. And we used technology extensively to be able to identify people who would be eligible for getting those kind of grants. And again, it was a specific expertise which perhaps is available more in organizations like many of you might be representing, rather than within the government itself. On the implementation side, I think it's quite well recognized that the kind of flexibility that different organizations outside the government have helps improve implementation. The kind of rapport building with the community that any informal organization will have will always be better than what the government can provide. And of course, the ability to engage with informal groups. In the ministry, for example, we run a number of old age homes. That's another, senior citizens is another area of our, where we work with indigent senior citizens. We have old age homes. And we also work with victims of substance abuse, which globally also is an issue, as is in our country too, where we run these drug de-addiction centers, which are again run by non-profit organizations. And I think that's the kind of passion that many of you have, that you work at the ground. And I think that collaboration in implementation is required, maybe in many other areas. During pandemics, natural calamities, I think everyone recognizes the kind of work done by various organizations in collaboration, of course, with the government. We also have some unconventional partnerships. For example, we work with a lot of spiritual organizations, the Gayatri Parivar, the Brahma Kumaris, the Art of Living. In the Nasha Mukt Bharat Abhiyan that we have, we want a drug-free India by 2047, to be able to engage with different groups, with youth, with women, with other sections of society, so that the program becomes so much more effective. And I think that's where a lot of the collaboration comes in improving effectiveness, timeliness, etc. And then, of course, we have areas where design, implementation, monitoring across all these sections are used. Before my present assignment, I was the CEO of UIDAI Aadhaar. And I always used to say Aadhaar is one thing which I'm sure anyone living in India cannot say, I don't know what is Aadhaar. But Aadhaar is also a unique example of how I would say the Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar work together, the design itself. We have technology which is at the cutting edge. We have infrastructure, we have applications that have been developed, and the front end, grievance redressal. And in each of these, I think the model is that there is always a private partner. It might be a for-profit or a non-profit. And I think the oversight and giving the broad framework is what the government focuses itself on. So obviously, as I mentioned initially, that it's not the same model that will work and what the balance would be, but depending on what the objective is, it would vary. And I would say UIDAI is another example of how different organizations have come together, or different sectors of society have come together. Transparency is one area where I think traditionally a lot of organizations, social audit is something that we are focusing on in all our programs to ensure that there is more social audit. It brings about transparency, accountability. And even at the back of the mind, everyone knows that 2 साल बाद social audit होगा तो थोड़ा सा ध्यान से करो क्या कर रहे हो. That itself ensures कि the program is so much more effective. So what I really want to say, a couple of other things and then I'll end. I think one thing that we need to realize is that there is no need to duplicate what another section of the society or in the different groups can do. There are comparative advantages which are there with not-for-profits. There are comparative advantages for the profits or the bazaar and Samaj. But there are comparative advantages of the Sarkar also, which very often we perhaps realize it, but we need to state it also. The kind of scale that government can bring to any program, I think, is unmatched. And I think we need to recognize that. There is no point trying to duplicate what the state can do. The kind of infrastructure that the state can bring cannot be matched. And infrastructure, I'm using it at a much broader level. And the kind of financial resources that are available with the government is definitely much, much more. But where the for-profits and not-for-profits bring in their comparative advantages, which I've mentioned during the course earlier, is the fact that the kind of flexibility, the kind of rapport building with communities, the kind of last mile connectivity which a not-for-profit brings in, the efficiencies of management, we are talking about the power of management, the kind of management techniques that the bazaar can bring in is what brings in that change. I remember a discussion with the World Bank team many years back. I said the World Bank might provide only 5% of the program resources, 95% will be by that government, but that 5% makes that 95% so much more effective, so much more useful to the final beneficiary or the citizen, that its value should not be measured in terms of the financial resources, but I think the kind of management support that is brought in by the Samaj and the Bazaar, and I think we need to recognize as a group together. So I'm sure these dialogues on development management through the day will bring up these topics. But once again, thank you and a pleasure, and thank you for listening so patiently. Thank you all.
Seven years ago, when we started ISDM and we used to meet a lot of people, everybody would ask us, have you met Dasra? Have you met Dasra? Have you met Dasra? Please meet Dasra, Niranand.
Oh gosh, what an introduction. I'm not doing podium more because of my height than anything else, and I didn't wear heels. I think they probably asked you to speak to Dasra because we've been around for 25 years. We will be 25 years old next year, and Deval and I started Dasra when we were 24 years old. So if you do the math, yes, we're almost 50. Apparently 40s and 50s is where, we all have this new calling in life. Those are probably the age groups where they start looking at our sector for jobs. I'm told 30, 40, 50, the niners, so 29, 39, 49, 59. So beware of the niners, they can be good and bad. But where to begin? So when, can you hear me okay? On this mic, okay. So when Ravi asked me to speak and said I'd be on a plenary with Saurabh, I was like, oh my goodness, the person that created Aadhaar. And Ravi, oh, that's easy, we'll just be in a plenary conversation. And he's like, no, you need to go up there and you need to talk to a group. And then I was like, oh, okay. And then I noticed it's 9 a.m., so I was like, oh, that's fine, it'll be an empty auditorium. But it's not an empty auditorium, and so what I was thinking about in the shower was, where should I start? Since it is 25 years. But really, I think what's most exciting is that, in fact, there is a dialogue on something called development management. And to be honest, when Deval and I were in investment banking at Morgan Stanley in 1999 and mergers and acquisitions, we thought we were so cool in New York City and on Wall Street. And we were like, wow, we're gonna change the world. We're gonna see all these big deals in the newspaper. But to be honest, it didn't feel very meaningful, only because we were analysts and we actually weren't making a whole lot of money. And we asked ourselves, could we do something that was meaningful? And Deval said, yeah, well, I'm gonna raise some money and I'm gonna go and support nonprofits. And I said, good for you, I'm going to Harvard Business School, see you later. So I went to Harvard Business School, and there wasn't a whole lot of talk at that time around development. There was a little bit of this whole thing called social enterprise, but everyone was getting super jazzed about how profit could have social impact. Very few were really anchoring work and management around nonprofits. But to be honest, what was seeded for me at Harvard Business School, other than having a tremendous amount of self-confidence and arrogance, was that they talked about leaders that make a difference in the world. And I think it was really there where I asked myself, with the privilege of education, with investment banking, my family having immigrated to Canada, yes, this is a Canadian accent, I thought, what could I do with that? And really, I came to be part of Dasra because we created Dasra with the simple idea that if we supported other NGOs, because we had neither money, frankly, nor a whole lot of skills at 24, but we could be bridge builders, and that could we bring those who wouldn't necessarily participate in the sector to the sector, but could we support nonprofits with management, kind of the yucky stuff like talent and finance. I mean, honestly, we started in the very beginning doing Excel spreadsheets with like Safina from Educate Girls, trying to figure out logos and branding and websites for like Magic Bus and Angan Trust and other organizations which now have become very successful. But the idea was, could we help with management? And then we realized very quickly, as much as you want to invest in management or development management, it costs money. At the end of the day, everything costs money. And so we didn't set up Dasra actually to be a consulting firm. We really wanted to help these organizations scale. And in India, for us, it really meant if we can't help NGOs scale, are we really going to be able to solve the problem? So then we looked on the other side and said, okay, let's start influencing philanthropy, families, corporates. CSR came. There was a big buzz around how can giving be more, fancy word, strategic. And we said, let's play there. And let's really try and bring funding, strategic funding, funding that will help organizations grow and really support the management capacity building of organizations. And so that's the origin of Dasra. We started ourselves with very basic capabilities like research, fancy word called due diligence, which feels scary, but simply are these organizations one can invest in? Because we thought a big excuse we were hearing from funders, philanthropists, is there aren't any good and trustworthy NGOs for us to fund. How is that possible with 3 million NGOs in this country? It's really because there's no transparency system to be able to find good NGOs. So we said, let's get rid of that and let's really do research and start a funneling process to identify great nonprofits. And then we realized as we began to see these organizations and trying to figure out what are the capacities that they really needed, we started our accelerator program about 15 years ago called Dasra Social Impact. And we found that there were two things organizations were really struggling with. Yes, of course, management, but actually planning, business planning of sorts, giving themselves a runway for what do the next few years look like was one part that they really struggled with, which is why we sort of called it the accelerator program. It was before the incubator hype started. And then we realized organizations don't pitch themselves very well. When you meet somebody often from an NGO, they dive straight into the impact in the community, which is actually the most important part. But you'll find that people stop listening to you. And so we built this whole capacity around elevator pitch. Can you share what your organization does for the 15, 30 seconds that you're in an elevator with someone trapped? And you'd be surprised how much that helps, just articulating, but also self-confidence to be able to communicate in ways that would hopefully enable more funding to come that side was our accelerator program. But as we thought about it more and more, where we really needed to focus, we realized that at the end of the day, no matter how much, and maybe this is in contrast a bit to Ravi, what you were saying, but I'm sure you'll agree with me, is at the end of the day, we realized the most important thing to invest in that will really enable scale for an organization is leadership. And investing in leadership that has the ambition and dream to scale is really where we started the Dasra Social Impact Leadership Program. And we've now had 650 alumni come through this program. And when we first started it, it started very naively with my whole aspiration that if I had access to Harvard Business School, then wouldn't that be so cool if Harvard Business School could come and work and be with, Dasra Social Impact leaders. Our first cohort basically threw out the Harvard Business School facilitator. I don't know if some of you are here, probably I see that were in this first cohort. But it was an amazing awakening that there were aspects, yes, of HBS, the way that they teach you, the case study methodology, the questioning, the arguments, the dialogue was at the core of what was the powerful curriculum in the Dasra Social Impact Leadership Program. But it was also aspects of management, right? We did leadership and branding, we did leadership and strategy, we did leadership and finance, and we did leadership and legacy. And that's really where we realized investing in leadership is really important. And so the reason I say that is a lot has actually changed. We ran this program for about 10 years and we took a pause. And part of the reason we took a pause was actually to see the amazing impact of other institutions and investments in capacity building, such as ISDM. So it's really amazing to see the interest in this and to see other organizations be quite committed to this. So what I thought I'll leave you with is two aspects. Another one I wanted to chat with a little bit more recently. So the leadership program, we stopped. Alumni's come back and said, bring it back. And to be honest, what they want to come back with is succession planning. Where are founders and directors right now? How are we building our next in line leadership so that in a time of crisis, our organizations will continue to be led? Something we found, I just want to leave a nugget with you, is the most effective succession planning is to build from within. And our sector, as we become a place to cross over, we bring people from the corporate sector, and it can be a great enabler. But in fact, growing your leadership from within the organization is more powerful than any other lateral hire. So just, keep that in mind. And it brings me to the second point, since, a lot of what you'll be talking today is around talent and leadership, is really where are our organizations and how are they thinking about talent? And we took sort of a quick survey, and you can catch this Thusser report online, but we took a quick survey of about 100 different organizations, and I see, a few of you I know here are running budgets of 30 lakhs, some of you are running budgets of 20 crores, some of you are representing hundreds and millions of dollars. So I don't know where this to anchor some of my comments, but I think it does help us to think about what is our sector generally struggling with when it comes to, growing organizational capacity and capabilities. So we surveyed around 100 plus organizations, and the biggest challenge that really came through was inadequate funding. So 60% still think that funding and being resource constraints is one of the biggest challenges. So we cannot shy away from the need to raise funds and move money, into this sector. Very close to this is another 60% is talent management. So one of your biggest challenges is money and managing talent, and 40% is branding and communication. So not much has actually changed in the last 25 years. The other interesting piece to think about is why are employees leaving? I know talent's not all about hiring and retention, but frankly, it is about hiring and retention. And why they're leaving, the highest reason, top reason is, what do you think? Yell it out. Compensation. It's true. 60% compensation and 54% career prospects and 31% lack of growth. And I'm out of time, but the reason that I bring this up is because as a sector, we've moved along and we've actually established good strategy. Many of you have great plans. What you're actually struggling with is hiring people and creating growth paths for them. So the one piece you do need to think about in our sectors, how are we building careers as part of this leadership journey? And not everyone will be the CEO and founder of your organization, but how are you motivating them? And you're absolutely right, the three main reasons and motivations end up being, is your supervisor and your boss inspiring you? Second, are you feeling like what you do is purposeful and contributing to the organization's mission? And third, are you being paid in what you think is fair that allows you to live the lifestyle that you do? I know I'm out of time, but I want to take just 20 more seconds, if I may, Ravi. And it's really because we've been thinking about Dasra and where can we go for the next 25 years, which sounds really scary. But since we're in the Ambedkar International Center, and I was sort of showering this morning and thinking, what a great location. And then you see that statue and you're like, wow, this man stood for such an unbelievable set of values. What an inspiring person. And it helped me just establish and ground our work around GEDI, G-E-D-I. Yes, it's been inspired by Star Wars, but it's G for gender, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And the reason I wanted to end here is the future of talent and the future of who we are. We need to ask and recognize our power and privilege. And so take a moment to recognize that. Our boards, for example, in India, 93% of them are higher caste. 93% of board directors are Brahmin and Vaishnavi. Do you ask yourselves, are we equally and adequately represented in your organization with gender, LGBTQ, as well as lived experiences? And so I wanted you to take a moment and pause and promise that when you leave from this dialogue that you will recognize your power and privilege and do something about it. Thanks.
I know we're coming close to the next part of the plenary, but I got a message from Poonam Choksi from A.T. Chandra Foundation, which was set up by Amit and Archana and others. Amit Chandra himself will be here later in the day if he's not already here. He's an amazing guy you must meet. But the message, and this is because it's about building the ecosystem for development management, I'm going to read it out. The Britspan Group, in partnership with Atma, is building a free online intermediary database to help NGOs overcome a key barrier of finding a qualified service provider for their organization development initiatives. This database, which will have more than 100 plus intermediaries, which NGOs can navigate to seek organizational development support across 10, 12 domains, is going to be hosted on the Better India platform and will be launched on 23rd of October. It just makes me believe that this event and maybe around this time is a great sort of a pivot for management in the social sector, and we'll see a lot more of the right kind of management in the social sector. I'm going to hand it back to the MC to take this forward.
But I need all of you for the photograph. Thank you so much to all the speakers for sharing their insightful views. Your inputs give us food for thought and also set the tone for the day. I would request Ravi to kindly felicitate all our panelists as a token of our gratitude and appreciation. I would like to share a little about the mementos today and how these resonate with our values. The certificate presented to our speakers marks a small planet-forward step. A tiny forest is being created at Devambar Dham, Kashipur, Uttarakhand by the Forest Institute. A forest is a part of is a for-profit social enterprise on a mission to bring back native forests. It was founded in January 2011. Their mission is to bring back the lost forests by creating them. Can I request Shelley to please come on stage with the certificate bag? Dr. Saurabh Garg, can we have you here? Thank you so much. And can we have the bag for Neera, please? And may I request all the three speakers to come together for a photograph? All three of you together for the photograph. Thank you so much.